Ah, we're live.
We're live. Hi, everyone. I'm Charlie Turner. That was Dan Beaver. If you caught that little "we're live" thing there, that's we're here for our weekly, well, almost weekly, except when they have off weeks. Race rewind for the NASCAR Sprint Cup series. This week we're going to talk about last weekend's Brickyard 400. I guess won by Jeff Gordon in unexpected manner, I would guess. Jeff Gordon getting the best of the final restart of the race and driving away from the guy who led most of the race, Casey Kane. Was that the big story? Is that one of the? It's got to be one of the big stories.
I think it's a big story both in, actually, yeah, in several ways. He now has the record for the most wins at Indy.
Yeah.
He overcame that restart malaise one time during the race, but it was the right one time. And third driver to hit 90 wins. So it was those even numbers or milestones. It's probably not going to catch Pearson at this point unless he really goes on a tear, but it's kind of nice to see 200, 105, 90. So he's in his own little class, being in that 90 win category.
Yeah, I mean, it was a historic win for sure, and I think Gordon fans will be living with this for a while.
And where it came. If you're going to get milestone wins, you want to get them on tracks like the Brickyard. I remember several years back he either caught or just passed, I don't remember which one it was, Earnhardt at Talladega, Dale Earnhardt Sr. So that was another milestone win on a track that had some significance other than just the win. So it's kind of, NASCAR is prone to these kinds of stories, and maybe it's because they've got 2,411 races in the book, or 2,410 if you're Bobby Allison, apparently.
I have been chastised by Bobby Allison personally about that too. So.
Yeah, a race with no winner, but I think the race still gets included in the overall stats. Just not
it's included in his stats. I'll tell you that.
But
NASCAR is much as a Bobby Allison winner of '83, NASCAR Sprint Cup. No, '84. Cut me off. That was funny.
I'm with him on this. A race cannot not have a winner. Cannot go winless. So someone won that race. NASCAR hasn't given it to anybody. So.
Well, I've seen the way he handled Cale Yarborough at Daytona. I'm not arguing with him. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but anyhow, you want NASCAR is prone to these kinds of stories. It's all Eric Almirola's win a couple of weeks back in Daytona on the anniversary of Richard Petty's 200th win. Sometimes you just can't craft things like this. You couldn't write these scripts if you tried.
No, and I've had this discussion with a number of people and guys that have been involved in racing in a serious way at upper levels of management of race series, and they all, to a man or a woman, they will say that you just can't. There's no way you could believe that NASCAR would set these things up, but they're the luckiest people around. So it's I don't know. It's hard to argue with the way it turns out. But anyway, some stories that weren't positive. I'm sure that NASCAR, if they were writing the script, they would like to see Danica Patrick do better than finishing dead last at the Brickyard 400.
Yeah, and she had a good start. She actually finished 42nd. She managed to pass Bain there when she came back out to limp around. But that you live and learn, and whatever she did to snap the axle, or the reason she was out apparently was rear gear. I don't know if that's a separate issue, or maybe she'd broken the rear gear and not the axle, and it never got reported that way. But you'd want her to do a little bit better, and she hasn't been particularly strong on flat tracks this year, so I'm not sure that you would have to say that it was unexpected or you were disappointed in her results, other than the fact that you would have liked to have seen her up there.
Yeah, Casey Kane led 70 laps, the most laps led by any driver in the race, but then fell victim to Jeff Gordon's final restart. Kane looked like the car to beat to me up until that restart all day long. He would get out in front and just check out. And I don't know if something happened to his car during that restart, or if it just gotten to the point where the tires weren't going to be good after they cooled down, or what. But he kind of put the parachute on at that point and finished. What did he finish? Fifth or sixth, I think.
Sixth. And I think the conventional wisdom is probably true there. He was so focused on saving fuel, he didn't scrub his tires off. He didn't get them clean because he was trying to make sure they had enough fuel to go the distance. He didn't want to be weaving. Jeff Gordon pushed him hard, even under caution, to keep him from being able to do some of those things and concentrate on the business at hand. And I think in that case, Gordon managed to get into his head.
Yep.
It's also notable that Casey Kane's last win came in next week's venue, next week's race, the Pennsylvania 400, and he got that by passing Jeff Gordon on a late race restart. That's what we expect from Gordon on restarts. We didn't expect him to get the perfect restart he did, and quite frankly, I don't think he did either. The number of times he mentioned it in victory lane and post-race interviews, I think he was pretty shocked that he got such a good restart.
Other positive story from the top 10 is the two Rookie of the Year leaders finished top 10. That was pretty impressive there. Kyle Larson and Austin Dillon.
Yep. And in doing so, they both raised themselves to current chase contender status. Austin Dillon managed to get enough points to put him, 14th in the standings now? Or 13th in the standings now, that Denny Hamlin got his big penalty. But there are now 3 drivers outside the top 16 in points with victories, so that's the cutoff point to make it make the chase on points. I hope they stay there. I'd like to see 2 rookies in the chase, especially if it's a 16-man chase. There's enough room for these 2 rookies who are no doubt going to make their mark going forward. And them both finishing the top 10 in one of NASCAR's 3 or 4 biggest races of the year is serving notice that they're going to be drivers to contend with.
Yeah, and you mentioned
room to contend.
You mentioned just in passing there, Denny Hamlin's penalty. That's probably the other big story from this year's Brickyard 400. Hamlin and his crew chief and car chief were penalized lots of points and lots of money, but you say it really has no effect on anything. I'll let you explain that. The one effect that it may have is that it did allow one of these rookies to move up into contention.
No, it really didn't, because Hamlin was above them. He was one of the drivers in the top 16 in points, but he's got the victory. So dropping him out didn't even change that mark. It just changed it didn't even change where he'd be seated. So essentially, it's a meaningless penalty, other than just to serve notice that you can't do it. And if he were somewhere else in the standings, maybe it would make a little more difference. If there were more winners, maybe it'd make more difference. But we've got 6 races to go before the cutoff. Pretty much, we didn't need a unique winner in every race. No way that Hamlin's going to fall out of the top 30 in points. So it doesn't impact him one way or the other. And with there being 6 races, the 6-race suspension for his crew chief and car chief doesn't really impact anything either. So Hamlin, you can't fault NASCAR for not scaling the penalty to the point where it actually does hurt. They say what the penalties are going to be for the most part, and they live them out. But Hamlin really got lucky not being penalized, or where the penalty fell in the big scheme of things. This came next week or 2 weeks down the road, and he actually had to lose his crew chief for those first couple of chase races. Then we could say that it was a significant penalty. But right now, I don't think it's not going to affect anything except maybe cost them a little bit of momentum in these last regular season races and keep them from going into the chase with momentum. But quite frankly, they didn't have it to begin with, or they were just now starting to get it with some good, strong flat track runs at New Hampshire and Pocono. But for the most part, this has been a momentumless season for Hamlin. So let me backtrack just a little bit. In that regard, this penalty might have some significance, because you can't afford to lose your crew chief when you're just now starting to gain some momentum.
That's what I was going to say. They started to look like they're getting in stride a little bit the last, I don't know, 3-4 races, and now you have this. You do have an interruption. It's 6 weeks without a car chief and crew chief. That has to have an effect on what they do in the next 6 races. So it may take them out of contention in the chase. I mean, you only have those 3 races at the beginning to get into the next group of races. So getting off to a slow start's, that kills you for championship. So that is a story to watch going forward. Any other stories? Any big surprises other than what we've talked about so far in this year's Brickyard 400?
I was surprised Juan Pablo performed so badly.
Yeah, non-factor.
It was just never a factor, and I figured he was at least good for a top 15 in that third Penske car. So that was a little bit of a shock. Earnhardt not running particularly well, I think, was a little bit of a surprise too. It's notable that weekend before he was really disappointed with the 10th place finish because he had a car that was capable of winning. This week he should have been ecstatic with the 9th place finish because he had a car that probably should have finished between 15th and 20th,
right,
based on his average running position and what have you. But he surged at the right time and kept a perfect streak of top 10s on flat tracks alive. And he's the only driver now with a perfect streak of top 10s on flat tracks in 2014.
All right. Well, that pretty much winds it up for our race rewind for the 2014 Brickyard 400. We don't have to go into all the people that kissed the bricks and how many times they kissed them and all that stuff.
And who didn't.
Yeah, and that's for other types of shows. But we'll be back next week to talk about it is the Pennsylvania 400 this time, correct? At Pocono? Yes. Okay, so next week's race, the Pennsylvania 400. We will recap after that's all over with. Another flat track, I would think the folks that did well this week should do well next week in theory, and we'll see what happens. So for me, Charlie Turner, you can follow me on Twitter at OnPitRow, and Dan Beaver, my partner, follow on Twitter at Fantasy Race, of course, and read his Yahoo Fantasy Racing article at yahoosports.com. And check us out at On Pit Row Magazine on the App Store. So talk to you next week. Thanks, Dan.
Look forward to it.